Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you for being here today, connected on the internet. Today we continue with the Torah portions related to Isaac and his family. And so, but before we start that, let's do the blessing for the Torah portion that says, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with your commandments and commanded us to engage ourselves in the words of the Torah. Amen, amen. So today our Torah portion is called Toldot, which means generations, can be translated as generations. And it's going to be in the book of Genesis from chapter 25, verse 19 through chapter 28, verse 9. And as you recall, last time we spoke about Sarah had passed away. And so Abraham buys a plot of land called Machpelah, where he buries her. And this is the first possession of Abraham in the promised land. And then he sends his servant to find a wife for Isaac from his family. And then she comes back and they get married. And they speak about Abraham dying. So here in this Torah portion, we have the continuation of Isaac and his children, his family. So if you go please to chapter 25, starting in verse 19, it says, now these are the genealogies or Toldot of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he took for himself Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean, from Padan Aram, the sister of Laban, the Aramean, to be his wife. Again, remember that Rebekah comes from that area where originally Abraham came from also. Verse 21, Isaac prayed to Adonai on behalf of his wife because she was barren. And again, we know this theme of barrenness is something that we see in most of the matriarch. We have Sarah, we have Rebecca, we have Rachel, and even Leah, after a while, after having her first children, she also discontinued having children for a long time. So all these matriarchs have not a problem, but an issue about being barren, and it's all because of the purpose of the Lord in doing something great in their lives. And so some of the commentaries say that Rebecca was born without a uterus. So therefore, it's going to be very impossible to have children if she doesn't have a uterus to carry them. So Isaac starts praying for her. And it says, Adonai answered his plea and his wife Rebecca became pregnant. So he's 40 years old when he marries her. And we're going to read in a few more sentences that when the children are born, he's 60. So that means 20 years praying to the Lord for his wife to have children. So this is a true miracle. Verse 22, but the children struggled with one another inside her. And she said, if it's like this, why is this happening to me? So she went to inquire of Adonai. Now the thing is, she didn't know she had 2 children in her womb. So she feels this thing, something's going on, but she doesn't know what it is. And so it says that she goes to inquire of the Lord. Now we're not told how she inquires. Does she go to someone in particular? Does she have a dream? Does she have a vision? Is it through prayer? One of the commentaries said that she probably went to the yeshiva of Shem and Eber, and there she consulted them and they gave her a response. But either way, whichever way she got her response, this is what the Lord says to her. Adonai said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from your body will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other people, but the older will serve the younger. So now she knows she's got 2 children inside of her. So why? This is the stuff that's going on. Verse 24. When her time came to give birth, indeed, there were twins in her womb. Now the first came out reddish. All of him was like a fur coat, and they named him Esau. Now Esau is related in Hebrew to the word seir or something similar, which means hairy. So he was very hairy. His body was born very hairy, and his hair was kind of reddish looking. Verse 26. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding onto Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Why? Because again, in Hebrew, the letters that make the word for heel is Ekev, and it has the same consonants as the name Jacob or Yaakov. Therefore, the name of Jacob in the Hebrew is associated with the heel. And why is he holding on to Esau's heel? The commentaries say that Esau was trying to hit Jacob on the head continually with his heel. And you know that newborn babies, or even when they're womb, their skull, the bones of the skull are still not completely fused. So there's an opening here, and basically you can touch their little brain if you hit them, or you can do a lot of damage. So the thing is, why were they fighting? Because even within the womb, they already had this something inside of them that they knew they were going to be in conflict throughout their lives. So Esau is trying to, in a way, kind of kill his brother. So he's hitting him with his foot. And so Jacob grabs of it so not to be hurt. And that's the way he's born, holding on to Esau's heel. And again, this is commentaries, this is midrash. Remember that a midrash is a form of trying to fill in the blanks of things that we're not told in the Bible, in the Torah. And sometimes, most of the time, they're a little bit exaggerated, they're speculations, so not necessarily everything is true in the midrash. Verse 27, when the boys grew up, Esau became a man knowledgeable in hunting, an outdoors man, while Jacob was a mild man remaining in tents. So here again, these are idiomatic expressions to let us know that Esau was more inclined to the material world, to the natural world, to the physical things, while Jacob, living in tents, always being within a tent, meant that he was always studying Torah. And we have to remember that even though in the last Torah portion, they mentioned that Abraham had died, not necessarily everything is in a chronological format. So therefore, most likely that Jacob and Esau, while they were growing, grew up knowing their grandfather Abraham. And so Jacob was more inclined to be with his grandfather, studying Torah, studying about Abraham, studying about the promises. So he was more connected with the things that Hashem had already promised Abraham than Esau. Esau loved to be outside hunting and doing other things that were not related to the spiritual world. So even though these two guys are twins, probably physically they looked a lot alike. Maybe they had most likely the same stature, the same body build, even though one had more hair in his skin than the other one. But their character, their personality was very, very different. It was like night and day. Jacob was inclined towards the spiritual world, while Esau was inclined towards the physical world. And as I was saying last night, in a way that resembles us too. All of us have an Esau and a Jacob inside of us. We have this conflict of wanting to always do good, or have this conflict about between good and bad, making decisions and making sure that we try to do the best instead of the worst. So all of us have these inclinations of good and bad within us. And it says, Isaac was 60 years old when he fathered them. So we see the 20 years between the moment he married Rebekah to the moment that he had his children. It's interesting to see that of all the patriarchs, Isaac was the only one that had only one wife. He didn't get any concubines. He didn't get any other women, because 20 years, waiting 20 years for children, culturally, he was allowed to have married someone else or to have another wife, like what happened with Sarah and Hagar. But he never did that. He maintained faithful and loyal, trusting and believing the Lord that Rebekah would have children. And it says, verse 28. Now Isaac loved Esau because he had taste for wild game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. And again, it's not that one loved one child more than the other, but they had a way of feeling more comfortable with each other. So Jacob was favored by his mom, while Esau was favored by his father. And it says, verse 29, now Jacob cooked a stew. When Esau came in from the field, he was exhausted. So Esau said to Jacob, now there's a commentary that says, why was Esau so exhausted? The commentary says that that day he went out hunting and he came across Nimrod. You remember Nimrod? Nimrod was the guy that built Babel, and he was a hunter and a mighty man. And so it says that Esau battled with Nimrod and killed him. And by killing him, he took away his clothing. Now, what's the importance about the clothing? The tradition or the Midrash says that the clothing that Nimrod was wearing were the clothing of Adam. Remember when Adam was kicked out of the garden, that the Lord made garments for them? So they think that these garments were passed down through generation, and Nimrod had these garments. And so Esau killed Nimrod so he could have possession of Adam's garments, the original garments of Adam, because apparently these garments helped him to be able to hunt. Animals were attracted to him because of these garments. That's what they say. And I pass it on to you. And it says, Esau said to Jacob, please feed me some of this really red stuff because I'm exhausted. That's why he is called Edom. Now, again, we need to understand that Esau goes by three names: Esau, Seir, and Edom. Edom means red. Again, in the Hebrew, the letters that make up the name Edom or Edom is the same letters that make up the word for red. So that's associated with the stew that he's eating. And it says, verse 32, Esau said, look, I'm about to die. Of whatever use is this to me? Oh, I'm sorry, verse 31. So Jacob said, sell your birthright me today. Remember that the birthright was given to the firstborn, which meant that the firstborn was going to be responsible of the whole family once his father either died or was not capable of maintaining and keeping up with the family. So he was going to be like the leader of the clan or the family or the tribe. So that's what Jacob is after. But Esau says, look, I'm about to die. Of whatever use is this to me, a birthright? And why does he say he's about to die? Remember that his lifestyle was being out in the woods, being outside hunting, and he could have been killed. He could easily be killed by a wild animal, or maybe somebody else with an arch and an arrow could have killed him. So he thinks, his lifestyle is very risky. So he says, I'm about to die. So whatever use is this to me, a birthright? And Jacob said, make a pledge to me now. So he made a pledge to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Now, another thing that the commentaries say is that Jacob was making a stew, a lentil stew, because it was a way of lamenting the death of Abraham. So they say that this day Abraham had died, and a way of mourning was to make lentil soup, and that's what they would eat. So that's what they say. That's why he was making lentil soup. And also we need to understand that Jacob and Esau are not isolated. They're doing this probably in the tents within the clan. And so there's more people, there might be servants. And that's why Jacob says to Esau, please make a pledge to me. Why? Because the people surrounding are listening. And so they become witnesses of this transaction, this legal transaction, when Esau sells his birthright to his brother Jacob with a stew, by eating stew. Verse 34, then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank, then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. He didn't give it any weight. He didn't think anything about it. To him, it was nothing. And yet Jacob understands what that means. Again, remember that Jacob had been studying with his grandfather. He knew the promise. He knew what God had told Abraham. So he knew that was very important, the birthright. Chapter 26. Now there was a famine in the land. Remember that usually when blessings come, famine comes afterwards. Why? Because the blessing has to be tested to see if you're worthy of having had that blessing. And now Jacob just got his birthright. And it says, now there was a famine in the land, aside from the previous famine that happened in Abraham's days. So Isaac went to King Abimelech of the Philistines to Gerar. Then Adonai appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt. Remember that Isaac could never leave the promised land. We spoke about this last year. Why? First of all, because Isaac is the son of the promise. He was born in the promised land and he has to stay in the promised land. He is a prototype of Yeshua. He has only one wife. He didn't marry other women. Israel is the wife of Yeshua, or in a way, we can say that symbolically, not literally. And also, remember that when Abraham offered Isaac, he was willing to offer up Isaac. Isaac, even though he was not really offered up or killed, he became an olah offering, what they called a burning offering. So therefore, he cannot leave the promised land because he has a special holiness upon him. There's a special kedusha in his life. So it says, verse 2, then Adonai appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt, dwell in the land about which I tell you. Live as an outsider in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and to your seed I give all these lands, and I will confirm my pledge that I swore to Abraham your father. I will multiply your seed like the stars of the sky, and I will give your seed all these lands. And in your seed, all the nations of the earth will continually be blessed. Because Abraham listened to my voice and kept my charge, my mitzvot or commandments, my decrees, and my instructions. Here, what we see is that almost word per word, God is giving to Isaac the same promise and blessings that he gave to Abraham. Because remember, the descendants are going to continue that promise, are going to continue that covenant. Not only that, when he says that Abraham listened to my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my decrees, and my instructions, commentaries say that Abraham knew all the commandments, that even though they were given orally to him, he also knew the ones that were going to be given on Mount Sinai. So that's why he kept all the commandments, he kept all the instructions, and that's what he was teaching his children and his grandchildren. So Isaac stayed in Gerar, and Gerar is south of most of, let's say from Jerusalem, is towards the south and towards the west. It's still within the confines of the promised land. Verse 7, now the men of the place asked about his wife. So he said, she is my sister. Now we go through something that's very similar that happened to Abraham. And even though Isaac says it's his sister, which is not really true literally, but the commentaries say that Rebecca represented the Shekhinah, or the glory of Hashem, and the Shekhinah is considered like a sister. Why? Because a sister was a term of endearment that was given to another woman that was very loved, not necessarily meant that she was his sister literally or physically. It was a term of endearment. So he says, she is my sister, because he was afraid to say my wife, or else the men of the place would kill me on account of Rebecca, because she's so beautiful. The same thing that happened with Sarah. So Isaac is going through the same thing that his father did. Verse 8, now after he had been there for a long time, King Abimelech of the Philistines peered down through the window and saw, behold, Isaac caressing his wife Rebecca. So Abimelech called Isaac and said, so in fact, she's your wife. Now, how could you say she's my sister? Isaac said to him, because I said, or else I might die because of her. Then Abimelech said, what is it that you've done to us? Remember that adultery, even though these nations and these other cultures were very pagan, adultery was something that they considered very bad within their culture. So they didn't want to commit adultery. He has said he was his sister, but she was really his wife. One of the people could have easily slept with your wife, and you would have brought guilt on us. So Abimelech commanded all the people, saying, whoever touches this man or his wife will surely die. So that way he's protected. Isaac and Rebekah are protected from the people of that area. Verse 12, Then Isaac sowed in that land, and in that year reaped 100-fold. Why? Because of obedience. He went to where the Lord said to go. He did not go to Egypt. And why was the thing about going to Egypt when there was famine? Remember that in Egypt is the Nile River, and the Nile River, depending on the season, would overflow. And when it would overflow, all the sediment and everything that was in the river would fertilize the land. And so even though there might be drought in other places because of the Nile, that would allow the people to continue to sow and reap and have food all during the year. But Adonai said, don't go to Egypt, go to where I tell you. So Adonai blessed him, and the man became great and continued to become greater until he became very great. He acquired livestock of sheep and livestock of cattle and numerous servants. Then the Philistines envied him. Why? Because of all that he had. And remember that even for us, when the Lord blesses you, there's always going to be people that are going to envy what the Lord has given you. They want what you want, but they don't want to go through what you went to acquire that blessing. So there's always going to be people that are going to be envious of what the Lord does in your life. Verse 15, all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of his father Abraham, the Philistines stopped up and filled with dirt. So Abimelech said to Isaac, go away from us, for you are much more powerful than us. Imagine how large, how great the encampment of Isaac had become, that this king tells him to go away from his land. So Isaac departed from there, camped in the valley of Gerar, and dwelled there. Now the valley of Gerar is a little bit further, and it turns out that this place literally has many natural wells and natural springs. As a matter of fact, they say there's over 50 natural springs in this area. So that's where he goes to. And this should kind of remind us of what was happening with Abraham and Lot and their servants and all the things that was going on, because remember that they have so many animals, they need a lot of water, they need a lot of pasture, they need a lot of land to be able to feed these animals and have them a place to raise them. So it says, verse 18, then Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of his father Abraham. The Philistines had stopped them up after Abraham's death. Remember, the Philistines have always been enemies of Israel. They never had really good intentions towards Israel. He gave them the same names that his father had given them. Then Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found a well of living water there. But the shepherds of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's shepherds, saying, the water is ours. So he named the well Quarrel, because they quarreled with him. Then he dug another well, and they quarreled over it too, so he named it Accusation. Then he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he named it Wide Spaces and said, because now Adonai has created wide spaces for us, and we will be fruitful in the land. Now a commentary says that these wells represent the temples. The first two were destroyed, but the third temple, which belongs to the Messianic era, that one will always be overflowing. And remember that water is associated with the Torah, with the word. Verse 23, he went up from there to Beersheba. Adonai appeared to him that night and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you, and I will bless you and multiply your seed for the sake of Abraham, my servant. Remember that everything is due to Abraham's faithfulness and loyalty to the covenant. So he built an altar there and called on the name of Adonai. He pitched his tent there, and Isaac's servants followed out a well there. So like Abraham, he built an altar. Remember that the altar is a memorial. The altar is establishing a place of holiness, a kedusha, and it also represents the authority of Hashem in all that area. Verse 26, now Abimelech went to him from Gerar along with Ahuzat, his friend, and Phicol, the commander of his army. Isaac said to them, why have you come to me, since you hate me and sent me away from you? They said, we've clearly seen that Adonai has been with you. Now we have to remember, it's not that they worship Adonai, but they understand that this is the God of Isaac. They understand that the God of Isaac has blessed them greatly. So now they're afraid that Isaac may become an enemy. So they go there to make a treaty. So we said, let there now be an agreement between us and you, and let us make a covenant with you, that you will do us no harm, just as we haven't touched you, and just as we did nothing to you but good, and sent you away in Shalom. You are now blessed by Adonai. So they understand that Isaac is very blessed, he's very great, and they fear him. So they want to make sure there's a covenant between them so that Isaac does not become an enemy. Verse 30, that he made a feast for them and they ate and drank. Why? Because covenants were established with a meal. Then they got up early in the morning, made a pledge each to his brother. Then Isaac sent them away and they departed from him in peace. Now it happened that on that day, Isaac's servants came and told him about the well that they dug and said to him, we found water. So he called it pledge, or in Hebrew is the word sheva. Now sheva can mean 7, or sheva can mean a pledge, an oath. That is why the city's name is Beersheba to this day. And we know that the city's there still. You can visit it if you go to Israel, and still the wells can be seen. When Esau was 40 years old, he took as wife Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemat, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. So Esau married Canaanite women, but they caused a bitterness of spirit for Isaac and Rebekah. Why? Because their lifestyle is very different from the lifestyle that they're living. And remember that marrying strange women or women of Canaan meant that they would bring their gods and their customs and all their pagan ways. So that was really something that was causing bitterness of spirit to Isaac and Rebekah. Chapter 27. Now it was when Isaac grew old and his eyes were too dim to see, that he called Esau, his elder son, and said to him, my son. Remember, now he's at a point that he can't even see. He's almost blind. Here I am, he said to him. Look, I'm old, he said. I don't know the day of my death. So now please take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt me some game. Then prepare me a delicious meal that I love and bring it to me that I may eat, so that my soul may bless you before I die. So since he doesn't know when he's going to die, he wants to make sure that he blesses Esau. Why? Because Esau is his firstborn, and he wants to give him the firstborn blessing. But we know that that birthright was taken away, or was sold to Jacob. But still, in part of the culture, we need to understand that it was very important, the blessing of the father to his children before he died. And especially with Isaac being a descendant of Abraham, we know that these blessings are going to be prophetic. So he really wanted to receive the blessing. Since he sold his birthright, he wants to make sure that at least the firstborn blessing goes to him. And it says, verse 5, now Rebekah was listening when Isaac was speaking to Esau, his son. So while Esau went to the field to hunt game to bring in, because again, you know, hunting can take all day. So he's out there in the field. They know he's going to be late when he comes back. So she says, Rebekah said to Jacob, her son, look, I heard your father speaking to your brother Esau saying, bring me some game and prepare me a delicious meal that I may eat and bless you in Adonai's presence before my death. So now, my son, listen to my voice, to what I'm commanding you. Go now to the flock and bring me 2 good young goats from there, so that I may prepare them as a delicious meal for your father that he'll love. Then you'll bring it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before his death. Remember that Rebekah knew the prophecy, the word that the Lord has spoken to her about her 2 children, that the elder would serve the younger. So, and who's the younger one? Jacob. We don't know if she ever told Isaac, probably not. We don't know that she's told her children, probably not. She's kept it all this time in her heart, but she knows the prophecy. So that's why she's saying this to Jacob, to make sure that it's Jacob and not Esau that gets the firstborn blessing. But Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, look, my brother Esau is a hairy man, but I'm a smooth man. So physically, in that sense, they were different. Perhaps my father will touch me, because he's blind, so he's going to be touching him, and he'll take me for a mocker, and I'll bring upon myself a curse and not a blessing. So Jacob's afraid of doing this because he's going to feel like his father's going to notice the difference. And instead of getting a blessing, he's going to get a curse. Then his mother said to him, let your curse fall on me, my son. Just listen to me and go get them for me. So Rebekah is willing to receive a curse, should that be pronounced, instead of Jacob, because she's the one that's doing all the things that's going to happen with Jacob and Isaac. Verse 14. So he went and got them and brought them to his mother, and his mother prepared a delicious meal that his father would love. Rebekah also took her elder son Esau's favorite clothes. Remember the clothing that he stole from Nimrod? He gave them to his mother to hold on to take care of them. So those are the clothing that, according to the Midrash, those are the clothing that Rebekah gives to Jacob, the clothing that at one point belonged to Adam. So Rebekah took her elder son Esau's favorite clothes that were with her in the house, and she put them on her younger son Jacob, along with the skins of the young goats on his hands and on the hairless part of his neck. She put the delicious meal and the bread that she had prepared in the hand of Jacob, her son. Imagine how hairy Esau is, that she's putting the skin of the goats over the arms and the neck of Jacob. So when Isaac touches him and feels all this hair, he thinks it's Esau. Then he came to his father and said, my father. And he said, I'm here. Who are you, my son? Then Jacob said to his father, I'm your firstborn Esau. I've done just what you said to me. Sit up, please, and eat some of my wild game so that your soul may bless me. Then Isaac said to his son, how in the world were you able to find this so quickly, my son? Remember that hunting can take a whole day. He said, because Adonai, your God, made it happen for me, which is true. It's not a lie. Then Isaac said to Jacob, please come closer so I can feel you, my son, whether or not you really are my son Esau. He knows there's something fishy, something's not right. Remember that Isaac is blind, so he has to go by his other senses. So Jacob came closer to his father Isaac, and he felt him. Then he said, the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are Esau's hands. Remember, he's blind, which the commentaries say that probably even in the spiritual sense, he was also a little bit blind, because even though he knows something is not right, he still doesn't fully understand that it's not Esau, but Jacob. Remember that they're twins. And so they're probably the same stature. They're probably the same body build. Their voices might be similar, but not exactly the same. And the really big difference was that Esau was hairy and Jacob was not. Verse 23, he did not recognize him because his hands were like the hairy hands of his brother Esau. So he blessed him. But he said, are you really my son Esau? So he said, I am. Then he said, bring it to me and I'll eat some of my son's wild game so that my soul may bless you. So he brought it to him and he ate, and he brought him wine and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, please come closer and kiss me, my son. So he came closer and kissed him, and that way he can't smell him. When he smelled the smell of his clothing, he blessed him and said, behold, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that Adonai has blessed, and that field is Eden. He's smelling the smell of Eden. Remember, these are the clothes of Adam. May God give you from the dew of the sky and from the fatness of the land an abundance of grain and new wine. May peoples serve you and may nations bow down to you. Be master over your brothers. May your mother's sons bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and may those who bless you be blessed. Very similar to what the Lord had promised Abraham. Verse 30, no sooner had Isaac finished blessing Jacob, and Jacob had just gone out from his father Isaac's presence, then Esau, his brother, came in from his hunting. They almost crossed each other. Then he also prepared a delicious meal and brought it to his father. And he said to his father, Let my father get up and eat of his son's wild game, that your soul may bless me. His father Isaac said, who are you? And he said, I'm your son, your firstborn Esau. Then Isaac trembled with intense trembling and said, who was it then that hunted wild game and brought it to me? Now the commentaries say that his trembling was so intense because when Esau came in, he smelled death. He smelled death, contrary to what he smelled with Jacob, the smell of the field of Eden, of Eden's garden. And he says, who was it then that hunted wild game and brought it to me? I ate it all just before you came and I blessed him. And yes, he will be blessed. Remember, once a blessing is spoken, it cannot be taken back. And being a blessing coming from Isaac, remember that these blessings are prophetic. When Esau heard his father's words, he shouted with an intensely bitter groan. Then he said to his father, bless me too, my father. Then he said, your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing. He said, is this why he was named Jacob? Since he tricked me twice already? Remember that, again, you don't see it in English, only in Hebrew. You can see the association of a play of words. The name Jacob is also associated with a word in Hebrew similar to someone that is a trickster. My birthright he's taken. Look, now he's taken my blessing. Then he said, haven't you saved the blessing for me? Now we know that he didn't take the birthright. He sold the birthright to Jacob. So he wasn't sincere in that either, Esau. Isaac answered, said to Esau, behold, I've made him master over you and all your brothers. I've given to him as servants. I've provided him with grain and new wine. What then can I do for you, my son? Esau said to his father, do you just have one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Then Isaac, his father, said to him, behold, away from the land's fatness shall your dwelling be, away from the dew of the sky above. By your sword shall you live, and your brothers shall you serve. But when you tear yourself loose, you will tear his yoke off your neck. Now, when you read in Chronicles and the books of Kings and some of the prophets, especially the prophet Obadiah, you're going to see that Edom, which is Esau, the descendants of Esau, they always were enemies of Israel. And in the book of Obadiah, it makes the comment that when the first temple was destroyed and the people were being taken to Babylon, that Edom was on the sideways rejoicing that the Israelites were being taken away. They were being taken into exile. And you know that that's not good in the eyes of the Lord, especially when someone is down, to even beat them up more. They had no compassion. They had no mercy for their brothers. So therefore, Edom became a great enemy of Israel and many times rebelled against Judah when Judah was in the kingdom. Verse 41. So Esau bore a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, let the time for mourning my father draw near so that I can kill my brother Jacob. So he wanted to kill him. Again, the story between Cain and Abel. Now to Rebekah was reported the words of Esau, her eldest son. So she sent and called for Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, look, your brother Esau is consoling himself about you with the thought of killing you. So now, my son, listen to my voice. Get up, flee to Laban, my brother in Haran. Then stay with him a few days until your brother's rage subsides, until your brother's rage turns away from you and he forgets what you've done to him. Then I'll send for you and get you back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day? So she thought that same day, Esau was going to come and kill Jacob. Remember, they're both twins. That means they're both probably as strong as one another, so they could easily hurt each other. So she's afraid to lose them all in one day. And she uses this excuse to send him to Haran to find a wife to make sure that he's away from Esau. Verse 46, then Rebekah said to Isaac, I'm disgusted with my life because of the daughters of Heth. If Jacob takes a wife from the daughters of Het, like these women, from the daughters of the land, what is life to me? So Rebekah uses this as an excuse to make sure that Isaac sends Jacob away to find a wife in the family of Rebekah instead of getting a wife from Canaan like Esau did. Why? Again, they bring their customs, they bring their culture, they bring their pagan gods, and so they were creating a disorder in their family, chaos in the family. Chapter 28. So Isaac called for Jacob, blessed him, commanded him, and said to him, don't take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Get up, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take for yourself a wife from there, from the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. Now may El Shaddai bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you so that you'll become an assembly of peoples. And may he give you the blessing of Abraham to you and to your seed with you, that you may take possession of the land of your sojourn, which God gave to Abraham. So here now Isaac understands that of his two sons, that one that's going to continue the covenant, the one that's going to continue the promises given to Abraham is Jacob and not Esau. Maybe at this point, Rebekah had revealed to him the prophecy, or maybe just Isaac himself became aware and understood the plan of God, that it was for Jacob to continue the promise and not Esau. So that's why he sends him and blesses him with the blessing given to Abraham. So basically he's giving a transfer of the promises, the blessings, and the covenant that he received from his father Abraham. Then Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went toward Padan Aram to Laban, the son of Bethuel, the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, the mother of Jacob and Esau. Now Esau saw that Isaac blessed Jacob when he sent him to Padan Aram to take for himself wife from there. When he blessed him and commanded him, saying, don't take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Jacob listened to his father Isaac and to his mother and went toward Padan Aram. Then Esau saw that the daughters of Canaan were contemptible in his father Isaac's eyes. So Esau went to Ishmael and took Mahalat, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, Nebaioth's sister, for his wife, besides his other wives. So what does Esau do? He doesn't marry a Canaanite, but he marries cousins from Ishmael. Why? Because he didn't want to go all the way to Padan Aram, to Rebekah's family, do that journey to find a wife. So he was lazy. He like we've seen already, he doesn't care a lot about a lot of things. So he just stays nearby and finds another wife, thinking that that's going to satisfy his parents. Okay. So with that is the end of the Torah portion. If there are any questions or comments. Anyone have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I have a comment. I do. I mean, how do you get a blessing when you deceive someone?
But that was the initial plan of the Lord. I mean, we knew from the start that's what God had told Rebekah, and it really wasn't. In a way, it was deceiving, but it wasn't, because he was fulfilling what God had already told his mother. He was fulfilling, and first of all, we know that Esau couldn't care less. While Jacob was always learning from his grandfather, was following Torah, was doing everything possible. So he was really the one deserving of the blessing and the promise, not Esau.
Well, I mean, it's still deceitful.
Yes, but in a way, it had to be that way because it was already foretold in the prophecy. So this was the means to get to that end. So I know it sounds not maybe the best way, but still he was fulfilling what already was told. And so the only way, and remember, this was Rebekah's idea because she knew the prophecy. So she needed to make sure that Jacob got the blessing and not his brother, because remember that Isaac was inclined, was more favorable with Esau than was Jacob. So Rebekah needed to make sure that it was Jacob and not Esau that got the blessing.
But he ended up marrying from the tribe of where? Of Ishmael?
Esau, yes, he married from the Ishmael.
Esau or Jacob?
Esau. Jacob went to his mother's family.
Okay, okay. All right.
Yeah. Any other comment or question?
Pastor,
Yes, Linda. Yes.
I was doing a study this week on the foundation of the throne of God, righteousness. And I learned that if God sees any clear intent to serve him, because he is the keeper and the owner of righteousness, it becomes his choice to bless whomever he wants to. And they said that is why Abraham did not have to go through any type of redemption. God is so sovereign in that righteousness and justice that sometimes he sees in us what we can't see and in another person. And he saw in Jacob the desire to keep the things that his grandfather had taught him. And so God could overlook and let his righteousness prevail on Jacob's behalf. This thing of righteousness, the foundation, I'm studying this. I understand a lot of things about the Bible more clearly, because
I think there's a book from Weinfeld, Moshe, I think it's Moshe Weinfeld. It's called Social Justice and Righteousness. It's excellent. It's an excellent book that gives you all the cultural background of justice and righteousness. I think it's Moshe Weinfeld. Yeah. Weinfeld. Since I know you like to read, maybe you should try to pick up a copy of that.
Okay, Weinfeld, and it's called Justice.
Social Justice and Righteousness. Let me see if that's correct. It's a very good book, and it gives you the cultural background for the Bible to understand it better. Let me see. I think social justice. I think it's Weinfeld. Let me see. Yeah, it's called Social Justice in Ancient Israel and the Ancient Near East by Moshe Weinfeld, Weinfeld. Social Justice in Ancient Israel and in the Ancient Near East.
Okay.
So I highly recommend that if you're doing that study research, I think you'll enjoy it because it's going to give you a better understanding.
I have it right here. I wrote it down. Another thing that when I was doing the outside reading, Isaac at this time is unaware that Esau had given the birthright for a bowl of lentils and some bread and wine. So at that moment, one of the commentators were saying, Isaac became so furious or so upset because he was questioning himself as that perfect Olah. And then when Esau confesses that he's not in possession, this is crazy, of the birthright. If you know, Isaac calms down. He did not know Esau had sold.
Well, again, this is speculation and midrash. It's a possibility it happened that way. That's why he still wanted to bless Esau. He probably didn't know. He probably didn't know about the prophecy spoken to Rebecca, and probably didn't know what happened between Jacob and Esau. So it's a possibility, but then again, these are speculations. These are things that we're trying to fill around the Torah portion, because a lot of things are not said, but it's possible that could have happened.
But Pastor, in the word today, Esau says he supplanted me twice. You know?
Yeah, but he said that after what had happened. I mean, he
Yeah.
didn't say it didn't happen. It didn't say before.
Yeah, but
So
so
yes, I mean, Esau understood that both times that Jacob took away what belonged to him, but then again, he didn't care about his birthright. He didn't care really about anything.
But my point is, did Isaac know?
What I'm saying is that most likely he did not know. Either way, he didn't know about the prophecy that was given to Rebekah, and he didn't know that Esau had sold his birthright.
Wow.
Most likely because he's still wanting to bless him and think that he's going to be the firstborn with all the blessings and everything. So when he's saying this, that's why he was so in such an emotional state when all of a sudden Esau comes in with food and he's like, what? You know, he's surprised, completely surprised of everything that was happening.
Now, Pastor, I have eaten wild game because I'm from the group of people in America. I'm talking about our age group where our parents hunted. You know what I'm saying? So it was nothing for them to go out and get but something that I just couldn't understand, how the goat meat, the kid meat, could fool Isaac if he was accustomed.
I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe the spices that
Rebecca
used. I don't know. I don't like eating game. The taste for me is too strong. So I mean, I don't know. Again, remember that he's blind, so that's an indication not only of a physical blindness, but other aspects of Isaac at this point, to the point that he couldn't recognize the food as being, you know, domestic from right there. He couldn't recognize, he wasn't sure about Jacob and Esau. You know, he's kind of like not sure about a lot of things. He doesn't know a lot of things. So in a way, I guess Isaac was so simple and so trusting and so, you know, kind of laid back. He kind of took things, he wasn't sure. But then at this point, at his age, you know, so we got to give the guy a break.
Yeah, one of the commentators said that goat's meat has the texture and everything of wild game.
I don't know.
My friends from the islands keep trying to get me to eat goat's meat. And
my mom would make goat meat for my dad frequently, and I would just leave the house because I didn't like the smell and I definitely didn't like the taste.
And that's what they said.
I don't even eat sheep, lamb, none of that stuff. I just the taste for me is I don't like it. Sorry.
Well, I just couldn't understand it, but then I did the research and it said goat's meat.
Well, but then again, that's an acquired taste. It might be true, it might not be. I can't say yes or no because I don't eat it. I've never eaten, I mean, I ate it a little bit as a child, but I never liked it. So I'm not sure about that.
My last comment.
Yes, ma'am.
And I know I put this in here. I put these in the notes. Okay, birthright and blessing. Oh, that's my next to the last. What is the difference?
Well, the birthright gives you the position to be the leader of the whole family. You're responsible for the whole family. And the blessing is different. The blessing is a blessing. And one thing is a position, and the other thing is mostly a blessing that's going to deal with your future, with your lifestyle. It's something that's more for not now, but as you live, that will be coming about. While the birthright is something that the moment the father is dead or not capable of continuing as the leader, that son immediately takes over the whole family, is responsible for the finances, for the inheritance, for his sisters, brothers, family, for making sure everybody has food, everybody's okay. That starts immediately the moment the father can't do it. While the blessing is something that's not given until the father is about to die. And that blessing is something that's going to take that son all through the rest of his life.
Okay. Well, I learned today that giving them the land of Israel, Isaac and Jacob, was not a blessing. It was the continuation of a gift.
Right.
I said, huh?
It's a covenant.
All my life I've been teaching that was the part of the blessing. I learned today that no, it was the gift that God gave.
I mean, it's a gift. I mean, it's a gift, but it's a blessing because it's a gift. Absolutely.
Yeah, but
it's a gift. It's something that God as king, sovereign king, can give as a gift. And it has nothing to do with you or anything that you did. He just gives it to you, and that's yours, and it continues the line of descendants. It's an inheritance.
Oh, I've got to stop teaching that. I've been teaching it's a gift.
You're not completely.
It's a blessing.
It is a blessing, but it's a gift that blesses. Let's put it that way. But yes, it's a gift.
Okay, now my last comment, and I'm sorry. Genesis 25:5. As I was studying, they took the commentators took me back and said, most people teach that Torah was given at Mount Sinai, and the complete Torah was given there. They say, but that verse verifies that Abraham had been instructed in and followed Torah.
Yes, ma'am.
And when I went back and looked at it,
absolutely.
I got so sleepy studying that so hard, that one verse.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why God says what he says, because Abraham was exposed to all the Torah, the written, the one that was going to be written, and the oral Torah.
That was an eye-opener for me.
Yeah.
And the commentator says, even when you go back to Adam and Eve, God had instructed them in Torah. Cain and Abel, because God set up the sacrificial thing. I said, well, my thing is, I'm gonna be reading forever to try to understand all this. But I was that one statement, Genesis 26:5, it has all the aspects that you've been teaching us about Torah. The things that you do just because God said. But Pastor, one other thing, and I'm a stop.
Yes, ma'am.
I looked at this and it says that God blessed. Now, when Abraham died, Esau and Jacob were about 15 years old. They were young men who had been presented in the society of that time. Esau, according to the commentators, took up with the society, but Jacob, even though he had been presented in society and was considered a man, never became bosom buddy with the people in the society like Esau did. But Pastor, sometimes as I was reading, it was saying, I'm gonna bless you because Abraham obeyed and listened to me. And God began to tell me that still exists today.
Oh, absolutely.
For our children.
Absolutely.
If we are obedient and listen to God and do what he says, then our children will inherit from God in the spirit realm. So I was thinking
they also have to carry their responsibility with that. If they don't do it, it's not coming to them.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I kept listening, looking at that after I learned that phrase was a phrase that said that verse verified that Abraham knew Torah.
Oh, absolutely.
And then after that, I had to sit and chew on it for a while. But after that, when the Holy Spirit began to talk to me and say, that blessing still flows today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you listen, teach your children, you know. But I'm through.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining and being here. I appreciate it. So I'll see you next time, hopefully.
Okay. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Be blessed.